For some of us, books are as important as almost anything else on earth. What a miracle it is that out of these small, flat, rigid squares of paper unfolds world after world after world. Worlds that sing to you, comfort, and quiet or excite you. Books help us understand who we are and how we are to behave. They show us what community and friendship mean. They show us how to live and die. That was a little bit from Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, and here to chat today about it is Tim Villegas. So, Tim, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Mickey. Again. I'm a
Yes,
two-timer, I
there you
think.
go. It's a rare feat to do that. There's only a couple people that have done that, so congratulations. So Bird by Bird, it's an interesting title. I'd heard I need to read it, and I knew it was a book on writing, but was curious what the title meant. And so I think we're going to start with that quote just to frame that a little bit, and then we'll kind of dig in. But from the book, Anne writes, she says, 30 years ago, my older brother, who was 10 years old at the time, was trying to get a report written on birds that he'd had 3 months to write, which was due the next day. We were out at our family cabin in Bolinas, and he was at the kitchen table close to tears, surrounded by binder paper and pencils and unopened books about birds, immobilized by the hugeness of the task ahead. Then my father sat down beside him, put his arm around my brother's shoulder, and said, "Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird." And so I thought that was, it really is a great title because that's really what she talks about the whole book is don't overthink it. Don't try to have this huge grand plan. Just get started. Just get that first bird out of the way. Just make the shitty rough draft she talks about a lot. Just
Yes,
get something
yes.
going. So yeah, but this was your call to read this book or to cover this book today. So yeah, tell me what led you to want to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, a few years ago, I really wanted to get into like the craft of writing, and so I wanted to read more books about writing, and Bird by Bird was always on my list. And when I read it, I realized just how valuable all the insights were, and it's really helped me as a writer and just as a communicator. And I really wish I would read it more often. Like I think when I
Hmm.
read it at first, I'm like, oh, I got to read this like every year because it just reminds me
Gotcha.
of like to keep the what's important in front of you, and so yeah. And so when I saw it on your list, I was like, oh yeah, I want to talk about that. I want to think about that book again.
There you go. Good call. Yeah. I've talked before. I'm bad about not rereading books, and I think I should have a handful of books that I reread frequently, and I don't. And this would certainly be a good one. And it's relatively short too. I think it's about 6 hours on Audible. So again, probably roughly about a 6 hour read for those that read at speaking speed, which is about what I do. So yeah, it'd be a good one to cover repeatedly. So
Yeah,
lots of little pieces in here. But yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I bet this is a really good Audible. So, did Anne does Anne read it?
I
I
don't
wonder.
know. I don't do the audibles generally, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that.
Yeah.
So Anne, I actually first got introduced to Anne Lamott with her more kind of like spirituality and theology books. Traveling Mercies was one of the ones that got um, tagged for me, and I have read parts of Traveling Mercies, which is excellent. I just
Okay.
really, really like Anne's writing style, and
Hmm.
so whenever I write, I'm like I try to channel Anne Lamott because it's such she's so personable and authentic, and everything that I want to be when I communicate. So just absolutely love this book and everything I've read from her.
Yeah, she's very big on authenticity, which is interesting because I cover Seth Godin quite a bit, and he's largely against authenticity. And I think there's a place for both. His argument against it is that for certain roles in life, you don't want people to be authentic. You don't want your heart surgeon to be authentic to how his days go. You want him to do his job. But I think when it comes to writing and learning and that kind of stuff, authenticity is critical. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of play the balance of those two. But she talks about that a good bit about being authentic. I like sort of the dark side of authenticity. She said this quote here I love. She said, "quote You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better." And I've always liked that, where people think, "Oh, you shouldn't be so mean." Like, no, if you're telling the truth about what happened, like they should have behaved better. And I see that with people and corporations, and if they want people to say nice things, then do things that are worthy of having nice things said about you. So,
Yeah. Well, the so she opens the book with like the very first sentence is that good writing is about telling the truth, which I
hmm
think is yeah. So you recently wrote a blog post about media, right? How
hmm
we are the media,
yep,
and that a lot of times what sells or what gets clicks is extreme viewpoints.
yep, for sure.
And so my kind of version of authenticity is telling the truth but in a way that connects to people, and that is hopefully interesting enough that they pay attention to it. But without the whole, yelling fire in a theater. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. And that seems to be, what people do to try to get more attention, because most people, especially on social media, are trying to get more eyeballs, and you get eyeballs by yelling fire and yelling that everyone that doesn't like fire is awful, and just making it as extreme as you possibly can be. So yeah,
Right,
that's a
exactly.
good point. Yeah, finding that middle ground is tough, and yeah, I think this is where it's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way, but this is where truth kind of comes in, because people feel compelled to go to the edges for views where their actual truths probably lie somewhere in between. They're just not willing to say that. Shankar Vedantam on Hidden Brain has some episodes about that, the Hidden Brain podcast, which is
Hmm.
fantastic. But he talks about, I think he used the example of like the border in the U.S. If you think immigration should be allowed at all, but under certain circumstances, then suddenly everyone hates you, because you either need to be all against it or all for it. There's no place for middle ground. And he makes the point of, well, no, we all should be in the middle somewhere. It's just, again, that doesn't get eyeballs, and it's tough to do.
Right. And for the most part, no one is one way or the other. Like once you actually sit down and talk with somebody, it's very
Hmm.
rare that you have such like demagoguery. You know what I mean?
Yep, for sure. You mentioned a little bit. I really like her thoughts on avoiding perfectionism. This is something
Hmm.
I know. I think I've talked about here before. Allie and I kind of struggle with, because she is much more of a perfectionist than I am, and I'm probably too far away from it. So having that balance between us is great. Where she'll push to make things better, but I'll push to get things out. But she talks about how perfectionism is the voice of the oppressor, the enemy of the people. It will keep you cramped and insane your whole life, and it is the main obstacle between you and that shitty first draft. So again, you want it to be perfect, and just willing to put it out there it's tough. I mean, that's kind of held me back from writing for so many years, but now I blog every day, and I know that some of them aren't very good, but I'm okay with it. They're all just, I consider them all first drafts basically, and some I'll repost, some may turn into a book, some may turn into conversations, but it's just getting stuff out there to start the conversations and to clear up my head, and it's been great.
Yes, exactly. And that's been my philosophy with podcasting, for a long time. I feel like as much as I've tried to hone my craft of writing, it's really more about me honing the craft of podcasting. But the same principle applies. Shitty first drafts, just getting it out there. It doesn't have to be the same every single time. Like,
Hmm.
your audience will forgive you. For instance, it's the holiday season right now, so I've completely not. I decided against publishing. I publish weekly.
Yep.
I decided against publishing the last 2 weeks of December, because it would be like too big of a lift for me, and I think I'm just gonna let myself be okay with that.
Yeah,
And
that
no one.
works.
I have not gotten any angry emails, so.
Which is kind of a bummer in a way, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I suppose so.
it's kind of like if you miss an episode of publishing your podcast and no one complains, like, wait, you should all be upset. Come on, what's going on?
I know, I know. It's okay. It's like I think, well, there's a lot to unpack with that kind of idea, but I think it's okay to not be perfect. It's something that I'm definitely learning in my, personal life. So it's also something that, as professionals, we can really embrace.
Yep, for sure. And it's tough though, because we want to be perfect for our clients and do perfect work for them, but
Hmm.
even in those cases, you can't always either. If you can be a little more messy getting things done, messy tends to lead to greatness, but it's a tough road in between. So
Yeah, yeah.
she talks about writer's block a little bit. I like her thought on that. She simply says the word block suggests that you're constipated or stuck, when the truth is that you're empty. And so this is something I work on a lot, like trying to
Hmm.
write. I try to write blog posts every day, which is tough because of the block. And again, it's not a block. I'm not stuck on anything. I sometimes just don't have anything to write about, and so it forces me to look around and find things to see. And I think I've compared it before to a photographer on a photo walk, where if photographers on a photo walk, they're just scanning the world to things to take photos of. And I kind of treat my life now like a blogging walk in a way, where I'm always just looking for what's something interesting to write about. Again, kind of Seth Godin-ish, where I just see interesting things in the world and write about them. Just the other day, I don't know if I published it yet, but I noticed when I turned on my car, it's a Hyundai, it has a big long thing like viewer privacy policy at http:// it was like a 50-letter URL. I'm like, no one's going to type that in. Like, but why did they do that? Why did they just buy like HyundaiPrivacy.com or something to direct? And just kind of unpacking little things like that. Like, do they not want people to click it, or were they too lazy to buy a URL? So just seeing, again, not running empty on blog ideas, but just kind of seeing the world around me as potential things to write about, which again can lead to bad posts sometimes. I don't think that one's going to be super exciting, but it's still interesting. So
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I really like this story that Anne talks about in the book about the Special Olympics meet. Do you happen to remember that
I
at
don't
all?
offhand know. Yeah,
Okay,
share that.
so Anne goes to a Special Olympics meet. If anyone doesn't know what that is, Special Olympics is I believe it's an NGO nonprofit. It gets some funding from the Department of Ed, I believe, and they put on these like Olympics meets for individuals with disabilities, and that's all the way from elementary school all the way to adults and stuff like that. And so she apparently was going to one, like I think her friend had a child that was participating in this meet, and the race is taking place, and one of the children falls. And instead, of just like everyone running the race, like the kids help the other kids up, and they like cross the finish line together, and everyone just is
Right.
like clapping and stuff. So it's not even really about the competition. It's really just about like kind of going through and doing life together. And it's kind of like what I like about it. It's kind of this approach to life and writing that's really not, we're not focused on winning, right, or
Hmm.
perfection. In
Yep.
fact, it could be really, it could be really slow. It could be, not exactly perfect, or in a straight line,
Right. For
you know.
sure.
But you're kind of like uh, going at your own pace, collaborating with other people, looking out for other people. And I just really like that imagery. And that's kind of special to me because, of advocacy for individuals with disabilities. And I just was like, there's so much there to unpack. I thought that was a really neat story.
Yeah, I do like that. I remember it now that you've walked through it. But yeah, it's interesting to see where that takes place in the world and where it doesn't. Like our meetup that we've hosted for 15 years now. You've been to a few versions of it,
Hmm.
and we try to be that way where we're not trying to be the best or win anything. We're trying to just like give away our secrets and let people give away theirs, and just kind of rising tide lifts all ships kind of thing. And I kind of do the same with my blog. And again, it's mostly because I know I'll probably never get money from it really, so I may as well not worry about it. But there's two approaches when you write online: is to write in your place and have everything drive back to that, or just get the word out there. And so in my case, I published a full post on LinkedIn. I published a full post on Substack. I published a full post on Medium. Like wherever people are, let them just read it versus trying to get more page views on my site and get more ad revenue. And people worry about getting stolen. Tim O'Reilly talks about obscurity is a greater threat to artists than piracy is. You can worry about people stealing your
Yeah.
stuff, but you should be more worried about no one ever even knowing who you are. And that's, yeah, interesting place to be. But it also, it kind of
Yeah.
points back to what you're saying, in a roundabout way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I think I don't want to be obscure. I'd rather people, I guess, um, quote unquote, steal our
Right,
stuff.
exactly. Yeah. And if people are stealing it, it means other people are probably buying it. So it tends to work out pretty well, to a degree.
Right. Yeah, well, writing, writing like, I don't think I ever want I'm not writing to get rich or anything like that.
Right.
I think writing is a lot, so I guess if we take Anne's thought about, good writing is telling the truth, it's also telling your own truth, which a lot of time is therapeutic. So
Hmm.
for me, writing has always been a type of therapy.
Yeah.
So,
Now, how
uh,
much writing do you do, like by hand versus typing?
oh, I hate writing by hand.
I do too. So yeah.
Yeah. I have a, hold on. I'm pulling out my notebook. Okay, so I have a notebook, and just to show you.
Yes, if you're listening to this, we have the video up on YouTube, so you can check this out.
Okay, so this is my. I'm showing you that this is my handwriting. It's pretty messy.
Better than mine, I
Uh,
think.
yeah, and what the problem is, and so I just basically, these are my notes, and I just write down kind of stream of consciousness whenever I'm meeting with somebody, and make like little bullets. And I try to write as least as possible, like the least amount as possible, because I just
Yeah.
I like do not like the physical sensation of writing. I never have.
Right.
Um,
Same.
and so typing has always been a lot easier. Um, and where was I going with this? We were talking about. if you ask me if I
Yeah.
hand write or if I type. Yeah, but I still like to handwrite because it makes me kind of like pay attention to what I'm doing.
You pay attention
Um,
differently. Yeah.
yeah, I pay attention differently, and I remember things a little bit better too.
Yeah.
Um, and also, if I'm typing, I'm focused on perfection.
Right. That's the rub right there.
So
Exactly.
if I'm like typing something and I misspell a word, I'm like, oh, I got to fix that. Whereas if I'm writing, it doesn't matter. I'll write like the first three letters of a word and just move on because
Uh-huh.
because I'm just like whatever. And then I just know I know what I did because I wrote it. It
Right.
it helps me understand my own handwriting. So
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts that handwriting helps you remember things better than typing, and I don't think it's the act of handwriting. People say it's the act of handwriting. I think it's like you said, because of what you're writing is different. You're writing a quick summary of what they said, so you're having to think through what they said and kind of put it in slightly different words because you can't keep up. When you're typing, you just try to keep up, and so you're not thinking through as much versus just trying to type as fast as you can to keep up with things. So it's better to slow down and have that summary. Although it's tough, and I think we're at a good place technologically now to solve this, but for a while I wanted to record everything typing, so I had everything recorded in case something came up. And now we can just record the meetings with video, and then we don't have to worry about taking as many notes. We can take more proper notes that are simpler and easier, ask questions, and then know that if we ever need the details, we don't have to write them all down. So we can always go back and get the details from the recording later. So
right, yeah.
that's been beneficial. But that's a good point. Yeah, but I've always never liked the sensation of handwriting either. I mean, I still do a little bit, but for the most part, yeah, I'd rather type and put things that way. But
Yeah.
so you
And
talked about how. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I use a lot of voice to text now. In fact, I've enabled the voice to text feature on both my. I have a desktop and a laptop now, and I'm like, I just don't even want to type anymore.
Nice. All right. All right.
So I'm trying it out. I think it's always nice to have that option. So
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. We'll see where that. I'm curious where that goes in a few years. Whenever we get proper AI assistants that are just like our assistant for us, we say, "Open this thing, go to that site," and you just kind of tell it what to do, and whether, when, if that becomes more efficient than using a mouse and keyboard. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see.
yeah.
Um, you mentioned that, so the very beginning of the book, yeah, good writing is about telling the truth. And then the next part of that is we are a species that needs and wants to understand who we are. And so she talks a lot
hmm
about writing just to understand things. And again, that's really why I blog. We've talked about that before too. If you want to read it and you get something out of it, cool. But it's really just for me to help unpack and understand the world and give me better clarity of thought. I heard someone mention the phrase clarity of thought some years ago. I'm like, that's what I need. Like Steve Jobs, he was a jerk, whatever, but I mean, he was successful, but everyone said he was the clearest thinker they ever heard, and that's what I want people to think about me is like Mickey's just a clear thought, not necessarily the smartest or best or, winner, whatever that might be, but just clear, knowing what I want, knowing what I believe. And writing is a great way, at least I found, to help get there.
Yeah, writing really, yeah, it helps me. And well, it goes along with what I talked about with the therapy. Like for therapy for me, is about clarity. It's like, also it comes up with, I come with what actually I'm actually thinking about and what I care about. And sometimes I don't always do that unless I'm intentional about really exploring a topic or a thought,
Right.
and writing kind of forces you to do that because you're putting words on paper and those words are your thoughts. So
Right.
um, and then when you write a blog post or you write an intro to a podcast episode or for Think Inclusive, one of the podcasts I produce, I do some reflections at the end. So it's like a one-on-one interview, and then I'll do like 3 reflections about the interview, and that also helps me kind of clarify, okay, what did I actually think about what we talked about?
Yep.
And so and I have to pre-write that usually. I don't just off the cuff, not like our
Okay.
buddy Adam, where he can just talk.
Right. Yeah. He's good at that. Yeah. In a good way. So
In a
yeah.
good way. That's right.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, yeah, this is a fantastic book. I can't remember even where it was first recommended to me. I was in New York, and I read almost everything on Kindle. When our family goes to New York, we always hit the Strand, one of the
Mm-hmm.
two or three locations of the Strand. I'm like, I got to buy something. And so I passed by this, like, oh, someone told me I should read this. So I'm like, cool. So I picked it up and started reading it in Central Park, which was kind of fun. But
That's
yeah,
great.
read very few paper books I read, and this was one of them, which was very appropriate because it talks all about the paper and the rigidity and all that kind of stuff. So it was a good one to read on paper as it goes. But yeah, fantastic book. Any closing thoughts for folks that are considering reading it?
Um, well, I would say the book and why I want to keep reading it is that the chapters are really short,
Mm-hmm.
so you can just buzz through it. Really, it really keeps the book moving. So
Yep.
if you feel like you just can't read another book, this is a really easy one to pick up because you can kind of and also you can kind of jump around. It's not exactly like you have to read it from cover to cover because the way that she puts the chapters, it's really just writing advice
Yep.
um, throughout the kind of the whole thing. So you can start at the beginning or you can start at the end, and you'll be able to get something out of it. Um, but the premise of the book, which is really breaking things down into small, manageable chunks, bird by bird. It's such a great life lesson. So
Yep.
I just need something I need to remember all the time.
Yep. Yeah, this is one I certainly need to revisit more often than I have, which is why I do this podcast. But again, in 6 months, I need to find a way to bring it up again. So maybe a reread would be great. So, Tim, this is fantastic. If people want to learn more about you or find your other podcasts or any of that stuff, where can they track you down?
Well, I'm very online, so you can find me on the Facebooks, the Book of Faces, Instagram Threads, LinkedIn. Just Google Tim Villegas. I produce two podcasts, Think Inclusive, and a narrative series called Inclusion Stories. And I work for the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education. You can find me at mcie.org.
Nice.
Um, and that's about it. Blue
Cool. Yeah,
Sky.
I'll link all that.
Find me
Oh,
on
Blue
Blue
Sky.
Sky.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
Blue Sky. There you go. That's where we're going. So, yeah, I'll link all that in the show notes if any you want to track him down. So, Tim, it's fantastic as always, man. Good to see you.
All right. Thanks, Mickey.
See ya.